This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.
Hello, I'm Michael Hershman, and welcome to Building Bridges, that which unites us. A candid conversation about culture, democracy, and finding common ground. This week, I'm joined by Mitzi Perdue, a larger-than-life personality whose work spans from rice farming in California to reporting from the front lines of the war in Ukraine. Her story is one of advocacy, purpose, and service. Mitzi is the author of 27 books, including the acclaimed biography of Chicken Soup for the Soul creator Mark Victor Hansen. A prolific war correspondent, she has written hundreds of stories, many from bomb shelters, that shed light on human rights, trauma, and resilience. And through her nonprofit, Mental Health Global, she's blending innovation and compassion to help address Ukraine's mental health crisis. So what does it take to confront challenges globally, locally, with empathy and heart? I'm so honored to have you here. I'm in awe. I mean, you've done more in your lifetime than any other 30 people I know.
I'm so honored to be here. I don't know what to do with myself.
But it's not only that you've done more. You know, starting out as a rice farmer, becoming an agricultural expert and mentor to women in agriculture, writing books, writing articles, having a podcast of your own, I believe, and a war correspondent. There's got to be a nexus to all this. What is it that drives you to do all of these things?
I guess, it's from a military recruiting slogan I once heard, be all you can be. So my goal is to be all I can be.
And I suspect that's every single day.
Every single hour.
So that leads me to the question of, do you ever sleep?
I think I need more sleep than average. I get along in 7 hours, but I really like 8.
So the company that I am the CEO of is one of the largest agricultural and ranching companies in the world. We are the 15th largest landowners, and so I'm a little bit into agriculture, and I want to know how you got involved in rice farming, an area of agriculture that we've not been in.
Well, I love to say, doesn't every little girl grow up wanting to be a rice farmer? But in case the answer is no, here's how it happened. My father was in the hotel business. He was the co-founder, along with my uncle, of the Sheraton hotel chain. When he died, kind of unexpectedly, I was 27, and suddenly I come into an inheritance that I'm not really expecting. At that point, I'm living in California, and I had the possibility of just turning everything over to money managers and putting it all in the stock market. And I thought, that's no fun. So I spent the next 4 years, I was living in Davis, California, taking courses at the local university with the idea that I would invest in agricultural land. I studied agronomy, agricultural accounting, rural appraisal, 4 years worth of stuff. And then I began looking at agricultural property, and I examined, enough to write a doctoral thesis about probably 30 different pieces. And finally, I found a rice farm. And if an apple orchard or an almond orchard had been an equally good buy, I would have gone into that. But I ended up in rice, and that's what I did from 1974 to 1988. And I loved it. And I got involved in women's agricultural politics, American Agri-Women, and I sort of climbed up the ladder of being a low-level person to I eventually got to be president. And I'm thinking, putting on my American Agri-Women hat, that we need to talk with you.
Well, I'd love to do that. But most people, when they think of rice farming, they equate it with Asia rather than America. Is there a large rice farming community in the United States?
Yes, we grow rice in several states, like certainly Texas, California, Louisiana, Arkansas. But in a good year, and I don't know when was the last good year, but in the best year, it can be our second largest agricultural export from California. So it's a big deal. But when you think farming in Asia. I remember, this is several decades ago, but there was a study of if you have an acre of rice, how many man hours or woman hours are going to go into producing a crop. In Asia, it would be 1,000 man hours per acre. In the United States, it was 1 per acre because we're so mechanized. In California, you used to fly the rice. Say you've got seeds of rice, you've sprouted them, so each little seed, imagine a grain of rice, has a little tail root of it. And this root, when you drop it when you drop the grain that's already pre-sprouted, when you drop the grain into the water, the paddy, it will, in a matter of a few minutes, it will sink to the bottom and the little root will start growing. And so while in Asia you transplant, or I don't know how they do it exactly right now, but at least traditionally how they do it, they would plant a rice plant at a time where we just fly them on.
So, I mean, but that's the vision when I think of rice farming, and I suspect others as well. I think of folks with their pants rolled up to the knees, walking around in water and planting and harvesting.
Then I'm going to confess to you, I actually did walk barefoot through a paddy just to say I'd done it, but that's not how it's done normally.
I suspect it's a little bit different from the paddies that I knew in Vietnam.
Extremely different.
Well, listen, I'm going to fast forward. We have a lot to talk about, including your writing and some of your mentoring efforts with women in agriculture. But I want to talk to you about Ukraine. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you about Ukraine is we need to bring the war back here visually and intellectually.
I devote my life to that.
You know, we hear about the war, we see images on TV of buildings and rubble, you know, we see children crying, but we don't feel it. We don't think it. And I want to know from you, what is it like today to walk down the streets of Kiev and mingle with the people? What are they thinking? What are they doing? What's the day-to-day life of an ordinary Ukrainian?
Okay, and allow me to give a background of why I have any qualification for saying this. I got invited to Ukraine by a really fortuitous circumstance. A couple of months after the full-scale invasion in 2022, I had written an article for Psychology Today on human trafficking in Ukraine. And it turns out that in conflict areas, the trafficking cartels will just converge because there are all these vulnerable people. Well, I'd written this story, and a few days after it was in print, I got a Zoom invitation from the chief of police of the Kyiv region, which is large. It has 6,400 people working there. The chief of police said, I was really interested in your story, and basically it was correct, but it hardly scratched the surface. If you will come to Ukraine, you can be our guest for 6 days. Ooh! I mean, as a journalist, does it get any better? So I arrived for my 6 days, and I learned a heck of a lot of how human trafficking operates. But I also, because it's the police who investigate war crimes, when I'd be in a police station, word would, in a village somewhere like Bucha, word would get out that there's an American journalist there who's interested in Ukraine. And some of these villages were somewhat out of the way, and people would come in to the police station to tell me their stories. And so I became not just a war correspondent, but my specialty became war crimes victims. And I believe I've talked with hundreds of people, and it's the war crimes victims that I've mostly written on, but I would get to know their families, I would get to talk, or just casual people in the street or in restaurants or wherever. And my particular approach to writing about Ukraine is, I want to tell the human side. I'm not going I'm not going to report on what battle moved here or there. I'm going to talk about what it's like for a mother who lost her 5-year-old daughter and is suffering depression, or a woman who was raped repeatedly by the Russians and has panic attacks and finds it hard to work. But then even talking with casual people, because I had the neatest thing happen because of my writing. I would be on Ukrainian television and I became kind of known. And so if I'd walk into like a warming tent, which is when it's cold and the apartments have no heat, the Ukrainian government put up these tents that have Starlinks so people can recharge their batteries and be warm and have hot tea. But I'd enter and they'd know me. It was exciting. I mean, for somebody with my personality, yeah. And I'm going to, this is a very, very long answer to your question, but what are people feeling, my sense of it?
Yeah, I want to humanize the war for the people here to understand what the Ukrainians are going through on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, the first, I've been there 4 times and I'm going again in October. The first 3 times, there was so much resilience and so much, we'll fight, this awful monstrous thing can't happen to us. But then a few months ago, it began to change. I would talk with people in the street or any place, and it was like a meme that was going around. I kept hearing this phrase, we can get territory back. It might take 30 years, but we can never get the land back. Let's just get this over. And that's what I heard over and over again.
So they're war weary.
The pain of losing relatives, of knowing that child's not coming back, or that this national monument is gone. At some point, I feel there was a tipping point where they just want it over. And again, you can get land back, you can't get lives back.
When you walk down the shopping districts or streets in Kiev, what do you see, what do you feel amongst the people that you're meeting?
Okay, the first 3 visits, people were just determined to have normalcy. I'll share a quick story. I hope I can make it quick, because I know I should. Of a woman I met in, I guess it was outside of a restaurant. And I complimented her on her fingernails, because I noticed that I'd never seen anything like this anywhere, but the Ukrainian women, all the ones I'd see, had beautifully done nails. And she happened to speak English. I asked her, I complimented her on her nails, and she said, yes, we are not going to let Putin destroy our love of beauty or our love of life. And then she told me a little bit more. She said, right after the invasion, she was just home crying all the time, but she has a young daughter. And at some point, a few weeks in, she just determined, I must be strong for my daughter. I must be a good example. I will do my hair. I will do my nails. Putin's not going to destroy our life. And when you'd walk in the streets, people would be reasonably well dressed, but then something flipped. Maybe, it's hard to put a date on it, but possibly half a year ago, where that resistance just didn't seem there anymore. I mean, and by the way, maybe 55% of the people feel the way I'm describing and 45% still want to fight to the death, but I do believe there's a movement towards thinking enough.
What do the Ukrainian people think about Americans?
Well, I can tell you that up until months ago, it was the nicest experience in the world for me to be an American, and everybody was so appreciative. I haven't been back since the new administration, so I can't speak for it. However, I can tell you that the day of the election, I got a phone call from a social worker saying, thank God, thank God, thank God, somebody's got to do something to bring this to an end. But I don't know what the man in the street feels about Americans right now. I hate to guess, because I think my guess would be very depressing.
Well, it's understandable, because they may feel that there's a greater sense of insecurity not knowing from day to day what the position of the administration
Oh, but then
is.
then I can share something else that I heard. I heard this, like, possibly in January or February of this year. There were people who were absolutely convinced that that there was a plan to end the war, and I heard this from several sources. So I do believe it's somewhat widely thought in Ukraine that the way to end it, Russia's economy depends on oil, and its budget requires $70 per barrel price of oil. Anything less than that, and Putin's running out of money. When I checked this morning, it was $56 a barrel. And when they were discussing how would Trump crash the price of oil, and there were two ways. He could cause international anxiety that would crash the stock markets, that would in turn crash the price of oil. He did it. And then he can ask the Saudi Arabians not to decrease their pumping oil, to flood the market. That's done. And so I hear some optimism from people, and I know this isn't politically popular to say this here, but I'm reporting what I've heard, that this, what's happening to the price of oil, will end the war.
Putin, do you think he really started this war because he was afraid for the security of Russia?
I've got such an answer for that. As a journalist, I did a little bit of research on Mr. Putin and war. And I don't think this is widely known, although I've written about it. Read me and you'd know it. Since 1992 to today, there have only been 4 years when Russia isn't at war. It's had 9 different invasions. It invades its neighbors, and then when I say 4 years when it wasn't at war, that's not knowing exactly what's going on in Africa, because they had Prigozhin's Wagner group doing nasty things. I think they're a bellicose, warlike nation. I think that I think they're able to have an extremely repressive regime by galvanizing people. Oh, we're at war. I think he has to have war. I think peace doesn't suit him. Or at least his track record is that he has not had peace.
Well, and that worries me, and of course that somewhat conflicts with the hope that the budget crisis will force him into a settlement that he doesn't see as a win for Russia. He may be willing to sacrifice every Russian, from the youngest to the oldest, in order to satisfy his thirst for what I see as expansion.
I think so. I think he's wired wrong.
He could very well be wired wrong.
Well, I mean, how about complete lack of empathy? I mean, I've read that there are around 1 million casualties right now of Russians. And by a casualty, that means deaths, but it also means somebody who's wounded so badly that it would be hard for him to work. I would bet that you and I suffer over 1 death or 1 injury. 1 million? It's evil. It's just sheer evil.
I know you have been doing not only reporting from Ukraine, but doing work in the mental health arena. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked, because this is so close to my heart. As somebody who interviews war crimes victims, there was a woman, her name's Daria. Actually, she's a little girl, she's 14 years old. And she came, I'm in an interview room in a police station, and she comes and wants to tell her story. And her story is that she and her stepmother and father had been visiting her godmother. They're driving away from her godmother's house, and a column of Russians come, and the car's stopped, and they take out their machine guns, and they shoot down, they assassinate, they murder her parents in front of her eyes, and she watches them bleed out. Now, can you imagine a worse trauma? Well, as she's telling me this story, and she's the age of my granddaughter, and I'm feeling protective and wanting to help her, but I'm noticing something, because I'm not a psychologist, but I write for Psychology Today, and even I can recognize what's called disassociation. It's when you separate what you've been through. It's as if you're looking at it from a third person's point of view, and she's telling me this story in a complete monotone as if it happened to somebody else. And here's what's wrong with a severe case of disassociation. The typical outcome, if that person doesn't get counseling, is they will self-medicate with drugs or alcohol. I mean, the strain of enduring this is so great that they just absolutely need counseling. So at the end of it, I asked the police translator, Daria is out of the room now, is little Daria going to get counseling? And the police translator told me there are 1 million people, at least in Ukraine, who are suffering at least as severely as she is. We have very few, in comparison to the need, very few mental health professionals. She's on her own. Well, so I started thinking, I wrote my master's thesis on the future of computers back many decades ago. Oh, heck, I'll tell you, I wrote it in 1965, and to save you doing the math, I'm 84. Well, that means a lifelong interest in what computers can do. And I started wondering, could something like ChatGPT, would there be a possibility of meet this desperate need for people who will get no help unless we offer something? Could we use artificial intelligence to counsel people? And I mentioned this idea to General David Petraeus, the 4-star. He liked the idea. We are implementing it in Kyiv right now with the help of the American University Kyiv, but also with Harvard University's medical school's trauma, I forget the exact title, but basically the part of medical school that deals with trauma, University of Texas, University of Maryland. There are a whole lot of academic institutions right now that are supporting this. We have a $40,000 server that's up and operating, and we're piloting it right now. And the results seem to be staggering, because you can program a chat to be completely relevant to Ukraine. It can use Ukrainian resources, things that the people who are running it are Ukrainians, and they're making it appropriate for Ukrainian culture. And we're piloting it in smaller groups, but we're getting bigger and bigger. And Iraq, the country of Iraq, wants to copy this. And if it works, it could be useful
in any conflict area.
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. And I'm afraid that everybody's going to discover that I have delusions of grandeur.
So look, often my guests, when they come, they'll bring me a cup of coffee. Sometimes they'll bring a book that they've written. You have brought a landmine.
Well, of course.
And tell us about this.
I want to show you something, and before everybody watching gets alarmed.
I just want you to point out that all of the producers have just run out of the room.
Come back. This is fake. It's plastic. However, no, do come back. It's okay. But what you're looking at, I think, is one of the greatest examples of evil possible. Because Ukraine right now is the most heavily mined, country in the world. And I discovered this when I'm driving through, or I'm being driven through a field, a highway, and we're passing some of the most gorgeous playgrounds that you've ever seen in your life. And the Ukrainians just really do playgrounds well. They're whimsical and beautiful and colorful, and no children in them. And I asked the police translator, why are there no children playing there? And she said, the Russians make it a policy. What you're looking at here right now is something that they would seed. Actually, they would just drop them in the playgrounds, and after a day or two, when pine needles and one thing or another is falling over them, you can't tell that they're there. But a child steps on one, or a child sees one and picks it up. Just the pressure of the touch won't kill them. There's 20 milligrams of explosives in it, and it's sensitive to the touch. So I touch this, and I'm going to lose my hands, or if I step on it, I'm going to lose my feet. And it's deliberately designed to be a dose that's small enough that it won't kill the child, but it will leave them maimed for life. But the real goal of why the Russians do this, and by the way, they do this in other countries too, it's not unique to Ukraine. The reason that they don't want to kill the child is you kill the child, the parent can go back to work. The child is maimed and needs constant attention. That parent is demoralized, probably not going to fight the Russians because they don't have the resources left to do it. They're certainly not going to fight. It's a way of multiplying pain, demoralization. I mean, what civilization goes after children? Who designs this kind of thing?
What are the Ukrainians doing? It's very difficult to deal with the number of mines that are dispersed, particularly since it's a war zone.
It's incredibly difficult. I volunteered to be on a very low level an advocate for the HALO Trust, which is the world's largest landmine clearance organization. And I've actually been on in active landmine fields watching them do it. I've actually swung the detector to see it. And I found a great big buzzing thing, turned out to be battery. But it's terribly slow, and it's extraordinarily dangerous if you don't follow the protocols. But if you do follow the protocols, it's less dangerous than, for example, logging. So it's dangerous, but it's not the end of the world. But at the current pace, without additional resources, Ukraine may not be landmine free for another couple of hundred years. That's the scale in which they're dispersing these things.
That's depressing.
It's inconceivably evil. I mean, in my ideal world, I don't believe in retribution. I really don't, but I do believe in deterrence. And if Russia can get away with war crimes like this, and it's just, oh, naughty, naughty, what's to stop the next one to do it? I mean, I want Nuremberg where people get hung. And God, I can't believe I just said that, but you've got to deter behavior that's this evil.
Well, there's no question that we've got to find out a way to punish those that are involved in war crimes. But it's getting much more difficult to do so because the world itself has become so much more divided. Not only our country, and I want to ask you about that. The divisions in this country, we've always had divisions in this country from the beginning of time. But they seem to be exacerbated in these days. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I moved to New York a year and 2 months ago. I lived in an area of Maryland that's the reddest of the red, and I'm in the Upper East Side of New York, which I believe is the bluest of the blue. And here's my opinion. They each will hardly speak to each other, but since I'm in both camps, I've got friends in both camps, I think they're all misunderstanding each other. I wish we could talk more, and I can't tell you how ecstatic I am with your approach of bridge building, because we need to, because we don't understand each other.
Well, people are talking past one another. What I'm concerned about is there is a culture that essentially says, if you don't agree with me, you're my enemy.
I so experience that. I mean, one thing is, I'm going to confess, I bite my tongue a lot and don't say anything because I'm aware that people so disapprove of a dissenting opinion that you're not you don't belong in polite society.
I don't fear evil. I fear silence. And
Guilty.
this division has driven people to be afraid to speak out. And that's, in my judgment, is worse than any sort of political divide than you could dream up.
Well, there's an author I admire no end, Solzhenitsyn, Russian hero. And Solzhenitsyn said that speaking the truth is the one essential thing. What do you do when you've got a coward like me? Because the thing is, supposing we're at a cocktail party and you're saying something that I really disagree with, and you're really firm about it, and not only that, you're morally righteous about it because you know you're right.
So I'm sure...
What do you say to that person? Because, let me add another layer to this. I have read, again, since I write for Psychology Today, I'm exposed to this, that my odds of changing your mind on a deeply held political belief are effectively zero, because it's your identity. And if I'm trying to tell you you're wrong, you don't want to think, oh, I'm wrong. No, you're going to think, Mitzi's wrong, and she's evil and bad and stupid and uninformed.
How true.
So what do we do about that?
Well, we take one day at a time, and we try to promote civility in discussions, and we try to find common ground. People in this country, the one thing they do want uniformly is happiness, security, peacefulness. And we've got to find a way to bring that to more people so that we can become a united country again. We'll never be in a country that agrees fully when it comes to politics. And our country was designed to be that way. I mean, we have a Declaration of Independence, which next year is the 250-year anniversary of the signing of it. And it promotes the values of our country. And we've got to make sure that we maintain those values, even though we do disagree. But I want to ask you, now, I know that we have some young women and young men that are listeners that are saying to themselves, I want to be Mitzi Perdue. Oh my God. How do I get started? I want to make a change, but I don't know where to begin. What's your advice to them?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of things that guide me. One is from Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa said, it's immoral to be discouraged by the magnitude of a problem. The good that we can do, we must do. And if you see an evil, the good that we can do, we must do. I have a definition of success, which is success is working on a cause you believe in at your highest and best abilities. And you don't have to get there right off. No, it's that you're moving towards it. And I think that means happiness and a good feeling. Oh, allow me to quote from my late husband, Frank Purdue. He had what's called an ethical will, values that he wanted to leave to his children and those who came after him. And he said, the way to be happy is to think of what you can do for others. On the other hand, you really want to be miserable, the way to be miserable is to think what's owed to you.
How did you meet Frank Perdue?
Oh, I met him at a party in Washington. And it was really cool because I was living in California, he was living in Maryland. And we discovered that I was a rice grower. He was a chicken grower. And we decided that chicken and rice would go well together, and we decided to marry.
As simple as that. Chicken and rice go well together.
Yes, it didn't happen immediately, though. It took at least 5 minutes, because the first 5 minutes of our meeting were discussing, we were both divorced, how we would never consider the possibility of the notion of marriage again. And then it sort of switched to, gosh, it'd be a shame to grow old alone, but would never trust anybody else again. And then he said, I believe I could trust you. And I looked up at him, and I thought, or I said, I believe I could trust you. And we agreed to marry. And when we did marry, we'd known each other in person 6 weeks and 3 days. So it was not a leisurely courtship.
You have a lot in common with people who are divorced. that always say, "I'll never get married again."
I believed
That's
it.
a standard line.
I totally believed it.
I got to ask you, so you're wearing a beautiful necklace. Now, I love it, but I'm not impressed with the sparkle. I'm not impressed with the beauty of it. I'm not impressed with what the cost might be. I'm impressed by the history of that. That is an extraordinary, I believe, shipwreck coin. Tell us about that.
Okay, the story is Frank Purdue, the chicken guy, had many, many hobbies, but I think his favorite one, the one that just captured his imagination most, was treasure hunting. And he was one of the backers of finding the sunken treasure ship Atocha. It sank in 1622, and he, as one of the major backers, he received enough of that $2 billion worth of treasure in it to help found a museum in Delaware, and most of the rest went to the Smithsonian. But he kept some coins for himself, and he kept an emerald ring. And so this is historic as all get out, and oh, do I treasure it.
It's amazing. But Frank Perdue, may he rest in peace, how would he feel about you calling him the chicken guy?
Oh, Frank was so aware that he looked like a chicken and he squawked like a chicken, and he built on that. Oh yeah, he'd be happy with it.
He didn't have feathers, though.
No, I guess they plucked them or something. No, he had an unending sense of humor, so he would have been fine with that.
That's amazing. And so tell us now, are you working on a new book or a new magazine piece? Or
No, I'm working on a project that I've already mentioned, the mental health global idea, where you use artificial intelligence to provide, we will stipulate that nothing's better than in-person talking with a therapist. But when that's 100% unavailable, as it is in many countries throughout the world, particularly conflict areas, what I'm working on is a program to provide free 24/7 mental health availability to people, and they can access it through their phone. They don't have to download a program or anything. And it's got military grade security, so General Petraeus is looking out for that part to assure that if you go tell your secret terrible fantasies or whatever that you don't want anybody to know, nobody will know. I mean, the chatbot will know, but that's going to get erased. I'm thinking, according to the World Health Organization, there are close to 1 billion people who have debilitating mental health conditions, such as, for example, panic attacks, insomnia, depression. Counseling can help. And this, if it works out, it could have a huge impact. And so I'm not doing any writing at all these days. I'm working on that, and I'm fundraising for it. The more funds that come in, the faster we can expand it.
So this is interesting, because in prior shows we talk about the pros and cons of social media, and we talk about depression and unhappiness in the country and the links to COVID, of course, and social media. This is one of the benefits of social media through artificial intelligence.
The results so far seem to me astounding. I mean, we're still in the trial phase, and we know that we're going to make a lot of adjustments along the way. But I'm thinking of a woman that I know of who is suffering panic attacks after repeated rapes by Russian soldiers 4 or 5 times a day, and she's a mid-level bureaucrat in, I believe it's Kyiv. But imagine how hard it must be to work in a war-torn country when you're having panic attacks. Well, I can tell you the advice she was given. She was told, the first thing to know about panic attacks, and anybody who's got panic attacks, this one piece of advice might be helpful. Panic attacks do not kill you. You think you're going to die, but you don't. So in the middle of a panic attack, tell yourself, I'm not going to die. And the second thing is they don't last forever. A bad panic attack may last 5 minutes. Really bad one, 10 minutes. End of the world one could last 20 minutes, but that's the most likely range. So if you're going through one, tell yourself, I'm not going to die, and it's not going to last forever.
The last time I had a panic attack was a few weeks ago when I saw my wife going into Tiffany's. Mitzi, thank you so much for being with us today. I want to have you back because we've just scratched the surface. You are an amazing woman, and I consider myself very fortunate to have met you.
Okay, I feel like doubting and disassociating. Who are you talking about? But thank you.
As we conclude today's episode of Building Bridges, that which unites us, I am reminded that impact begins with the brave decision to step forward. Mitzi's journey shows us that whether we are working to improve lives locally or to help a nation begin to heal, the connection between people and their stories inspires hope for the future. A very special thank you to Mitzi Perdue for joining me, and to all of you for tuning in. With every conversation, we have the chance to build bridges that unite us.
This is Building Bridges with Michael Hershman.